I would like to hand over to Hardeep. Now, with Hardeep, we had some fantastic talks before, and what I particularly enjoy about Hardeep's talk is how she can turn abstract psychological construct in something to really pragmatic, both from HR and L&D sphere. And we have mentioned about leadership came up a couple of times during this conversations, should I say. And I could not think of a better talk to finish our conference on than actually with Hardeep taking us through, okay, what does the current situation mean for leadership and what is next? So without further ado, Hardeep, over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nikita. Really privileged to be here. I've been in the background this afternoon, and it's just been so insightful just to hear different viewpoints and different thought leadership. And gosh, this is, as horrible as this pandemic is, there's some amazing, for us as psychologists, there's some amazing insights that I'm sure will, be the basis of much work and much thinking in the future. So really privileged to have had the opportunity to hear a lot of first-hand thinking, so thank you. So as I say, pleased to be here, and I'm the last one on the slot, so I'll try to keep to time. I do want to share my insights with you this afternoon, but equally I really want to use this group to kind of understand, actually, these are my insights. I work in the field of leadership, but actually I'd really love to understand other people's views and think about how we can take that forward. I can see Nikita walking on the beach just there, which is, I'm very envious.
Yeah, need to keep hydrated.
Fabulous, fabulous. So just in terms of a quick introduction, I am, first and foremost, I'm an occupational psychologist. I do specialise in leadership, executive coaching and talent and succession management in large multinational organisations. I'm currently a head of talent and development in a FTSE 100 asset management company, but they are generally my areas of specialism. So for me, leadership has, when I did my psychology degree, when I did my occupational psychology, I don't know why. Well, I do know why, but for several reasons, leadership has always interested me. I've always been so fascinated how one area can have so many models, so many frameworks, so many different interpretations, so many theories. And actually, depending on which model you read or which framework you go along with, which competencies you think are important, actually that's what then sets the foundation for what you think great leadership is. It sets the foundation for how you think the next level of leadership can develop, what kind of leaders you would like to have in the organisation. So, and I think also when we talk about leadership, everybody has a different perception of what a leader is in their mind. For some people, it's, absolutely a thought leader. For other people, it's an entrepreneur. For somebody else, it's a huge organisational level CEO or senior leadership team. So we all have different perceptions of what we consider to be leadership. But I think what's the current situation has highlighted is for me, more so, it's highlighted the complexity of leadership, the impact of leadership. The minute we all went into, we all kind of adapted to this pandemic, we were asked to work at home. Amazingly, who did we look to? We expect our leaders to help us to navigate. We expect leaders in if you're working in an organisation, or if you yourself are leading an organisation and run your own companies, people are looking to you to guide, to navigate, to help you manage. But actually, having spoken to many leaders throughout the last 4 or 5 months, this has actually been a very confusing and painful and sometimes quite nerve-wracking experience for them. So I think today, as we have some discussion, I'd really welcome your views on how leadership has been and what you've seen. So what I wanted to kind of use this slide, this is from PwC, and I actually love this slide. I just think it's ever so colourful as well. COVID-19 has, in many ways, fast-tracked transformation in so many areas. Today, in the talks that we've heard, we have, experienced the impact that it has on mental health, the impact that it has on digital transformation, the impact that it has on emotional and mental well-being. COVID-19 has literally, in my mind, rocked us to the core. It has pushed us into places and ways of working and ways of doing things in a way that actually would have probably taken us a very, very long time to get to. It has increased disparities in many ways. It has highlighted those that have, those that have wealth and those that don't have that level of wealth. All the stats and all the reporting show us that the crisis has hit poorer regions, poorer countries the hardest. It has really highlighted that divide between developing countries, third world countries and first world countries. It's very apparent. Unemployment at the bottom of the wealth pyramid looks like it's going to become even worse than it's ever been before. And actually, small businesses look like they will fail on a massive scale in a way that they've never failed before. It's been very disruptive. In terms of technology, we have had to fast track our use of technology. Many organizations never even thought to work at home. They didn't even have the technical capability to work at home. There was presenteeism in the organization. Work was done at work and nowhere else. So this has made people adapt to home working, remote working, where they've never had to do that before. Roles that were always seen as office-based are now no longer seen as office-based. And it has also highlighted to us that actually there are some roles that are really not needed. So it has been very disruptive on many different levels. It's had an impact on age, and I like what someone mentioned earlier, but actually it's impacted different age groups in very different ways. For those people that are in their, that have children, maybe in their 30s, maybe in their early 40s, it's been very disruptive because you've blurred the boundaries between your personal life and your professional life. For me, I'm one of those people. I like having my work and then I like having my home life. And now it's all blurred into one. So actually it's been very disruptive in that way. There's people that live on their own, they're millennials, they like the workplace, they like it to be engaging, they take a lot of social interaction from the workplace. This has actually been very lonely for them. It's really impacted their mental well-being. So this has highlighted ever more the different generational differences within employees that we have in organisations. I think the economy will never look quite the same. It may get really better over a period of time, but right now it's problematic. I think also something that's really come to the forefront is trust. So for me, this has shown the leaders that trust their employees and their teams and the leaders that don't trust. And trust for me is a very, very important characteristic when you talk about any kind of leader. Whether that be you being a leader in your family setup, you being a leader in your workplace, in your friendship group, whatever it may well be, the level of trust has come to the surface. So I think for me, to start off with, just wanted to highlight how COVID-19 has changed the way in which we look at leadership and the way in which we require leaders to be in a way that we hadn't ever anticipated. The definition of leadership, I challenge that. Has it now changed? Our expectations of leaders has been very different to what we've had in the past. So I'd like to open the chat and on that note, ask you, what attributes are required for effective leadership? The first things that come to your mind, what you need from leaders.
So we have a few in the chat: integrity, honesty, empathy, transparency, empathy again, trustworthiness, yep. Ability to listen to their followers. Yep, a very underrated skill. Not afraid of change, compassion, authority, compassion. Yeah. Seems an interesting combination of authority and compassion there.
Yeah. So I think, and as I say, it's amazing. We all have a different perception of what we think is needed from a leader. Some of those would have been ones that I would have thought of instantly, others I would have questioned. But actually, we need to ask ourselves, now with everything that's happened in this global pandemic, has our view of what we need leaders to do and to be, is that now different? Do we require a different kind of leader? There's, you know, for anyone that works in the leadership field in particular, it's been fascinating how many articles are online, how many consultancies have commissioned work around leadership and what do we need for the new world, post-pandemic. It goes on. And actually, it's amazing because, again, there's, I think, as much as there's a huge responsibility for leaders, there's also a huge pressure on what we now expect from them. So just in terms of conversations that I've had and some of the insights that I share with you today are from my own work with the leadership teams that I work with, the board level, the executive level that I work with daily, conversations that I've had with peers, people in my own existing network and actually my extended network now. There's huge amounts of attributes that people talk about for effective leadership. And the one that comes up to the surface more than anything is empathy, emotional intelligence, and having a sense of resilience. And they are probably the three characteristics that you hear repeatedly. And actually, if you take a step back, are they the same attributes that were required previously when the global crisis happened in 2008? Possibly yes, possibly no. But actually, I challenge making that comparison because the scale at which this pandemic has hit us is not quite the same as what it did way back in 2008. So actually, these attributes, resilience, empathy, emotional intelligence, they are traits that actually we don't always push our leaders to develop, especially if they're in revenue generating roles. We look to them to be visionary. We look to them to be commercial. So actually what we're now asking from them looks to be quite different. Okay. And I think just as much as we may have differences in the leaders, in how we define leadership and the attributes that we think about when we think about leadership and what's needed for today and tomorrow, we all resonate with different leaders. If you look at psychological theory, we are drawn to people generally that are similar to ourselves. That's innate, that's built in us. And actually, if you think about, you know, take a moment, maybe after today's session, and think about actually who do I resonate with as a leader? Who do I find really appealing? Whose ethos, whose vision really calls out to me? And why? Yeah. Is it something in me that I see in myself? Or is it something that I want in myself? Yeah, that I'd like to develop in myself. Because actually a lot of our connection to different leaders, you know, be they celebrities in some senses, or political leaders or politicians or very well-known CEOs, there's a reason that we gravitate towards certain leaders over others. Yeah. And actually that drives us to then really accelerate our views of those leaders. So there's people that buy into, as an example, Trump. They buy into his style of leadership. They buy into Steve Jobs' style of leadership. And actually everybody else in the world may not necessarily agree with that, but there's a reason why that style of leadership people really resonate with. So I would encourage you to think about who are the leaders that come to my mind and why. Okay. So as we talk about leadership and as we talk about the current context, a couple of thoughts here on what we've been on, different insights and different conversations that I've been having that have come to the surface. People priorities and the people strategy for those of us that work in HR and talent development internally in organizations, I actually think this has been an amazing opportunity for the business to see what value we bring to the working world. because actually we've been there to guide and support and, you know, and consult and advise around people priorities that actually we've probably been knocking on the door for quite some time. So everything had to happen at once. Leaders have had to adapt to a smart way of working. They've had to work remotely. They're not able to travel as much. They've had to have virtual meetings. You know, we've got leaders in our organisation that actually have never, they've rescheduled meetings if it had to be done virtually or remotely. Because actually for them, their level of engagement with individuals has been in person. So adoption of smart work has really accelerated the leadership platform. We've had to put in place measures to support health and well-being. I'm sure many of you have had it, you know, internally within organisations, wherever you work, you know, people have really tried to push that well-being agenda. And a big part of that has been engaging employees, trying to keep some kind of collaboration together, to get people to feel more connected. We've had quiz nights, we've had, you know, examples of what you've been doing in your downtime, you know, making cakes, you know, gardening, I've done this project, I've done that. We've really tried to help bring people on board. There's been a lot more guidance around well-being than we've ever had to share before. There's been a real focus on health. How do you, you know, providing yoga lessons remotely, providing guidance on actually how do you look after your health, but when you work at home all the time, your chair support, various other things, occupational health. So we've had to fast track measures to support health and well-being. A really big thing for many organisations has been mitigating people risks. How do we save the people that we've got? How do we downsize and, you know, only keep the people that we need? How do we mitigate people risks? I've had some quite difficult conversations over the last few months around the perception of what talent is. What does potential even mean in our organisation? So what other people, prior to COVID, the perception and the definition of what high potential was, what a future leader was. When now leaders have seen people struggle, people themselves not keeping it together, is that person really a future leader? Because actually the pressure on the leader to now know how to lead in ambiguity. There's many leaders that are slightly older and have literally tried to replicate how they managed during the global financial crisis in 2008. And actually that hasn't always stood them in good stead. So the past experience that they've had in a crisis hasn't necessarily enabled them to lead during COVID. So I think there's a real focus on the people agenda, both positively and not so positively. Huge requirement to manage the workforce flexibly in a way that you've never done before. Communicate with empathy and understanding. It's actually quite hard work for many of our leaders, because actually they're not the attributes that you get taught. Many leaders tend to be those that have, you know, worked their way up in the organisation. They may have been the revenue generators themselves, and now they've taken on very senior leadership roles. So empathy and understanding doesn't always correlate with being commercially savvy and being somebody that drives business profit. So actually this is for some people, this is almost a new skill set that they've had to develop. They've had to endeavour to stand together, even if they truly don't believe in standing together. We've had to push them together. We've had to make sure that other employees feel that you've got a leadership team that is connected, that is here for you. We've had to drive digital readiness when we've not been ready to drive digital readiness. We've had to fast track platforms that we were just thinking of or maybe hadn't even thought of. So the current responses to the people priorities have been, well, above and beyond what we'd anticipated leaders would expect in 2020. Yeah, we can all agree on that one for sure. What does this give us? This gives us, for every challenge, there's a huge opportunity. And I'm just somebody, Nikita's worked with me for a while now. I do have a glass half full mentality, so I look for the opportunity wherever I can. Maybe a bit too optimistically at times, but hey, maybe that's a survival mechanism. Maybe I'm sure Nikita's got a view. So for us, what does this bring us? In terms of opportunities, smart working has now, there's an opportunity for it to become the norm. There's many people now that don't want to go back to work 5 days a week. How does a leader that thinks working 5 days a week in the office, how do we get them to see differently? How do we get them to adapt to, there isn't a pandemic, it's over, and then we're back to reality and we revert back to type? How do we get them to see that differently? How do we focus on productivity without being there in person? Employees' physical and mental well-being, it's not just for COVID-19. They need to become the cornerstones of our organisation. Black Lives Matter, huge movement that has really highlighted the diversity and inclusion agenda in a really powerful way. The paradigm for skills and talent. If someone isn't sitting with you every day, if you can't see what they're delivering every day, how do you assess if they are high potential for the future? How do you see their skills if you're not able to see them in person every day? So this has really shifted our perception. So leaders have literally had to, do a U-turn on things that they'd never had to think about before. We've had to really have a flexible workforce. I mean, I've seen our leaders try so hard to be understanding of people who have different responsibilities outside of work. They can't work certain hours. They need to log off at certain times. They've had to really be flexible. They've had to really focus on output versus presenteeism. And I'm going to come back to that from the heart, head, and the hands in a moment. What this gives us is an opportunity to have a real purpose-driven culture. There are some organizations that do an amazing job. People walk into an organization and they truly understand their purpose from every level in the organization. They can absolutely understand where their purpose is, what they're there to do. They understand from top down to bottom up, what is my place. So there's a real sense of purpose-driven culture. So this is a great opportunity to bring that to life. Also, new operating models and a robust digital backbone, not responding to digital readiness, but actually proactively seeking digital readiness. That's quite hard work for many organizations. So the one that really speaks out to me in particular is the leadership from the heart, the head, and the hands. What does that actually mean? So when a leader leads with their head, they're able to envisage the future and the priorities that are required to succeed. They're clear what good looks like. They're clear what success looks like. When they lead from the heart, they're able to inspire and they're able to empower employees. When they lead with their hands, they're innovative, they believe in agile execution capabilities. So actually that really speaks to the individual, it really speaks to the team, and it really speaks to the wider organization. So I think there's some thinking here, as I say, from many different people that I've had the privilege to speak to over the last 4 or 5 months, that shows that we have a wealth of opportunity waiting for our leaders. And our jobs in whatever we do, whether we're working with leadership teams or individual leaders, we're working in HR, we're working in L&D, whichever space we're working in, we have an opportunity to really drive some of these future opportunities. Yeah, we absolutely have a part to play in making that change. But as we all know, change isn't always easy. People don't readily adapt to change. This has all been quite painful. People like a sense of security and stability, and there's many people that will absolutely move away from change. It feels really strange for them. Then there's other people that absolutely say, oh gosh, I love change. I always look for change. But even all of the research that we look at indicates that we do crave some sense of continuity, some sense of consistency and stability. So actually this isn't a rapid change, this is a transformation, and this is progressive change at the right time. Yeah. Some more insights. Language can be very intimidating. If you look at some of the language that's been used over the last few months, it's actually, some of it is quite intimidating and quite threatening. The word crisis isn't always seen positively. The word fear, crisis, global pandemic, economic insecurity, recession, all of those words on for a leader could be quite intimidating. Yeah. The piece that I mentioned about adapting to change, we're looking for leaders to be spearheads of that change. We're looking for them to be the advocates of change. And all at the same time, we expect them to drive that change. We've seen leaders be more authentic and more vulnerable in a way that they've never been before. And that level of transparency has been, as much as it's been honest, it's also been quite powerful, but it's also driven a sense of insecurity in some people. Because actually you're looking to your leader to be that person that keeps it all together. So, you know, we've had a leader that I work with very regularly, and it has been amazing at how his level of authenticity and being able to say to his team, actually, you know what? I feel the fear. I'm worried about the economic climate. I'm really struggling managing my 2 children and a full-time job. This is somebody who we really didn't even know, we didn't know anything about his personal life, and we never needed to. He was quite a private person. But now we see his children, now we see his dog, and he seems so holistic and he seems so real to us now. So actually the transparency has been so powerful for his team and for us that work with him. So actually that transparency is really real, and we shouldn't expect people to now go back to work and revert back to type. The relationships that these individuals will now have with each other will be so different to the ones that they left with when they left in March from the workplace. The organizational culture, we need to question ourselves, do the values of the organization, are they sustainable for the future organization? Are they true? Are they relevant any longer? Because actually those values may have been created at a time when the organization was doing very well. It was growing really rapidly. It was really successful. So the vision, the purpose, the direction of the organization and the culture might now look very different. But actually, rather than being threatened or worried about that, this is our opportunity to make sure it's delivered in a very powerful way. Now, I love this one. I attended a Henley Management School seminar a couple of years ago, and I remember that big takeaway that employees are your true clients. If we invested half as much as we do in our employees than we do in our client, it would be amazing. So actually seeing employees as a true asset, I think that's been so powerful as a result of this situation. And actually, I think the final one is the opportunity for possibility. The opportunity for growth in a very different way. The opportunity for downsizing to succeed, to stay stable. So actually that sense of allowing our leaders to be open to different possibilities has been amazing. So all in all, over the last 4 or 5 months, where we've expected our leaders to be, where we've needed our leaders to be, where we now see our leaders going, possibly looks very different to the conversation that we may have started to have with leadership teams when we were setting objectives, when we were thinking about the business budgets, when we were thinking about the business plans way back at the end of last year or the beginning of this year. And our role has been to, as HR and talent development specialists, to partner with them and help them to navigate this absolutely surreal time that they've been in. So again, I think it's, for me, It's not about having a whole list of attributes. This is what we need for our future leaders. This is the model of leadership. I think it's keeping it really simple. It's acknowledging what life was like for leaders before, what it was like during this situation, and what it looks like moving forward. So just to summarize, pre-COVID, we were encouraging leaders to build individual and organizational resilience, to thrive and succeed in an ever-increasing complex and competitive environment. Actually, they were in control of many things at that time. This situation has shown that they're not actually in control of as many things as they thought of. During this situation, we've had to encourage them to lead with humanity and authenticity, enabling individuals to be your most valued asset. This is a whole different set of leadership skills to what was required pre. And the post, focusing on transformation and embracing the new normal rather than reverting back to type. Okay. So as I say, just some of the thinking and the thoughts that have now started to emerge from many conversations that I've had. So I'd really like to open up the chat and welcome your views on some of the thinking that I've shared this afternoon.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Hardeep. So, good people, any questions, thoughts, reflections? Either feel free to use the chat or just unmute yourself and chime in.
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Hi, Hardeep. It's Lee.
Hi there, Lee. Hello.
Hiya. Just one for me, and it's probably more for everybody, and Nikita also, is one our own culture. So we're looking at leadership from a global perspective. We're all very aware that there's different cultures at play, of which those leadership qualities and relationships with employees will be vastly different. I know the company I work in is the way I approach things in the UK will be different in the US, in Canada, in Mexico, and so forth. From your experience, I think, or from all our experiences, COVID has been the same everywhere, but there've been obviously different impacts. From your perspective, do you think things might align a little more in the world of leadership?
Absolutely. I think this has, and I have the same challenge, stroke opportunity in bringing a very globally dispersed set of leaders on board, and you know, as much as their challenges might be different in the markets that they operate in the geographies that they're sitting in, it's always a challenge to kind of bring them on board and without being so high level and keeping it real to a day-to-day life. Actually, this has really given us an opportunity to bring them together in a way that they haven't had to. So what we've tried to do is those that have been through, shall I say, their COVID experience started before as in the UK, i.e. the leaders that were in Hong Kong, the leaders that were in Singapore, leaders in Italy, we've really taken the opportunity to draw from them. So we're based here in head office, and there's always been, you know, for many of you that work in organizations where the UK is head office or the US is head office, it feels like you have to do everything that comes from the group team, and it's always kind of, you have to get on board if you're in a different geography. But for us, this has turned the tables. We've now had the opportunity to draw on leadership teams outside of the UK, and I think it's been so insightful, because actually they've led the discussions, they've shared their views. This has really heightened their recognition and their visibility in a way that we've never really had the opportunity to do so before. So I think, you know, as much as this is a painful, a surreal, and a very challenging time that we're in, it does give us a whole heap of opportunities and new ways and different ways of doing things. And that, for me, is really powerful for leaders that we don't usually get visibility to. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to chip in, Hardeep. That's okay. That's lovely. So you touched upon sort of millennials, and of course we've got a new generation as well going into the workplace now with people, with young graduates and all of that sort of thing, which is even more challenging. And so from your position as a talent manager and sort of development perspective, just wanted to throw something into the ring here that my lad, he did an online assessment center, and it was for some financial corporation-y thing. Very, very aggressive it was. And he came back afterwards and said, you know, even if I had got to the next stage, that culture would not have worked for me. I could not have worked in that space. And I think, you know, it's important for leaders, because there's still recruiting going on. You know, we're still having to move forward in this, going forwards, to really take this opportunity to be more empathic and engage with what people really need and value, because that is amplified so much more now than it ever was before. And any traditional Wolf of Wall Streety type approach, you know, is not attractive.
No, for sure. And I think for your son, probably a saving grace there that he got to see what kind of culture that was before he got there, possibly. So I think if he felt like that at the time, then that kind of indicates how the culture may be if he had been in that organization. I think it's, as much as we say it's empathy, it's emotional intelligence, I've had some very difficult conversations with very senior leaders in my own organization and as an executive coach externally as well, about, well, tell me what empathy looks like. How do I be empathetic? And they've almost, and it's kind of made me take a bit of a step back. There isn't a top 10 guides to be empathetic, you know, top 10 tips to make sure you're empathetic every day or once a week. It's not that. You can't pretend you're being empathetic. There's a level of authenticity. And if you aren't an empathetic leader, how do we help you become an empathetic leader? And what does empathy look like? I think there's also a bigger piece at play here. Over the years, you know, leadership models, leadership, you know, approaches, development programs, they've driven a real, you know, they may have driven a certain set of capabilities that kind of go against what we need right now. So again, my point that I made earlier, many revenue generating organizations push commerciality and they could push commercial vision. They don't necessarily push EI or empathy or resilience. And actually we need to push that, because actually that's what we need to be sustainable moving forward. So I think it's a massive, you know, a massive shift for anybody that has been a leader through, you know, if you think about somebody that's been a leader for 30 years, the way in which we're now talking about leadership, the way in which we're talking about attributes like empathy and compassion and vulnerability and authenticity, they may never have heard about that in their whole 30 years of being a leader.
And it's really challenging.
Oh gosh, yeah. You're asking, so things that they've been rewarded for and acknowledged and promoted for in the past, they're not actually going to look the same moving forward. And for someone that's, you know, an industry professional, they're skilled, that must be, you know, that must be quite scary, because you're now asking for something that I've never had to really do before. So I think to your point, they need to do that. And I think that's really key skills that we need to help them to develop. But I don't think it's going to happen overnight. And I think we need to be really clear why those particular attributes are so important moving forward post-COVID. And actually, what do they look like when you do them?
That's great, thank you. I won't monopolise. We could go on, but I'll let others.
No, I could too, for sure. Thank you.
Excellent. Probably in line with your personalities. Combine curiosity and extroversion, and sky is the limit when it comes to discussion of ideas.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Would anybody else like to chime in or ask a question or raise a point? Hey, Mark.
Hi, Hardeep. another amazing presentation. Thank you so much.
Most welcome. Thank you.
I have a question. It actually relates to the previous one as well, which is an excellent question. Does this mean that leopards now have to change their spots? And if that's the case, in terms of leadership in future, are we going to be looking for different kinds of leopards with different spots on them?
Yeah, I would say possibly so. I also think that we're not asking you to be completely different from what you've been before. There are many, many things that stand the test of time. We still need leaders to have a vision. We still need leaders to be, savvy and commercial. We need leaders to be good communicators. They need to be clear. They need to bring people on board with them. We still need all of that, all of what we've had in the past, because actually those attributes have stood leaders and their teams and individuals in very good stead. But actually, I think it's about adding a few more spots that you may not have had previously, and making sure we're clear what the value of those are. I've had many people pretend to be empathetic, I would say pretend, and then tomorrow they can't do it because it's not something that is recognized. It's not something that we reward or drive forward. And I do think from a talent identification, a talent management, a future leader development perspective, this situation has shown us some of the attributes that we really do need to focus on. So I think the type of spots might look quite different moving forward. The leaders that we have now, we now need to work with them so that they can actually be adaptable, they can be empathetic, they can show the resilience and help people during this time. And then the leaders that we develop from the future, we absolutely need to leverage all of the great learning that we've had, that we've seen, that we've experienced in this time, to then be clear, actually, we need leaders to be a certain way so that if this ever happens again at this scale, or even worse, you're very well equipped to guide and lead and, take your team and take your organization into the future. Because I must say, what's really interesting is the conversations that I've had with people that were part of the whole 2008 crisis and working with leadership teams then. And actually they themselves, big consultancies that we've worked with that have worked around leadership, etc. And actually they struggled to articulate exactly what's needed at this point in time, because it isn't what was needed way back in 2008. So I think we need to be quite cautious and quite open to leadership looks very different at different points in time. So what we need to develop are very adaptable and truly agile leaders.
That's perfect. Thank you so much.
Excellent. And yeah. Matthew has an interesting question. Do you think the demands shareholders put on leaders will change? If not, then lasting change will be difficult.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a very topical area. I absolutely, I'm always confident that things can change, but I think the expectations on leaders that we have as employees and other leaders will look quite different from what the board or the shareholders have. Because again, this is not about, we're not asking, it's not an either or. We're asking you to know how to adapt your style of leadership. If you think about the situational leadership model, we're asking you to adapt your style according to the situation. So I think there's a big piece here about the shareholders and the board will always expect something from you as a leader that doesn't always look the same as what your employee expects from you.
Indeed. So the question is, what will be encouraged, and can the leopards change their spots before it get hit by number 54 bus? So yeah, playing off the metaphors here. Can't resist. So thank you very much for that, Hardeep. I just want to gather people's reflections and takeaways from the session. So if you can go back to Menti 91517 and just type in, what are your reflections from this? One moment. Here you go. So what are your reflections from Hardeep's talk about leadership? And does it change? Does it need to change? And how will it look like? And will we achieve truly agile leadership? The only thing Zoom is missing is elevator music when you're asking for a poll. After they've done that, it will be complete. Connection, that's great. Was real and not perception. That sounds quite meta. Would anybody like to chime in of why they put that down? I'm just really curious about the thoughts.
I think that was, can you hear me, Nikita? I think that was mine. We can't see your screen, but I just think it's really just reflecting on the whole day as well. And I think, Hardeep, you just brought a lot, again, some points into this crucial area of leadership. You know, we've talked about what people perceive is their interpretation of their situation, let's say, with COVID and all that sort of stuff. But what's the real, what if you're a leader, what's the real things that your the people who work for you and how you connect with them, what is their real perception or so their real understanding? And unless you engage and take time out of your day to just sit down and speak to them and understand, then you're probably not doing justice as a leader.
So sitting down and gaining an understanding of actually what's real for the individuals you work with.
Yeah.
Successfully navigate the unexpected. That sounds like a good leadership development program to me. New levels of awareness required. And Hardeep, can you see my screen?
Can't actually.
Oh, strange.
Do I need to stop sharing?
Maybe if you stop sharing yours, we can see mine.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Excellent. So can you see it now?
Oh, yeah, I can see it. Lots of
Brilliant. So what's
there.
standing out for you?
Oh, this one's really interesting. The younger leaders will fare better than older leaders. Yeah, and I do think generally, you know, this is an experience for all of us. The insights that we're going to take from what has happened and what is going to happen as a result of it, it's so much easier for us to then develop future leaders and, you know, high potential individuals based on those insights. And actually probably a bigger opportunity and challenge for us is those that don't know any different, that actually, like, as I say, for the last 30 years, they've been told that they're great leaders and actually they've got all of the great skills to be a CEO. And that's quite difficult because now we're asking something else of them.
Indeed. The transformation of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. So considering asking something else, on that note, thank you very much, Hardeep, for sharing your wisdom and insight with us in the leadership space. And as far as on the subject, by the way, are you happy for people to connect with you on LinkedIn?
Oh yeah, absolutely. More than happy. I love a good discussion. So yes, please do feel free to reach out to me.
Fabulous.